I came up with the 5 A's. I don't know if I want to share that now. Perhaps we can use that as a frame. And it ties into what you said, the 5 A's of martial activity. And these are kind of whys, but this might be interesting since this is kind of our first discussion in this format, to map out why people train. And maybe the viewer already trains something general or specific in terms of style or lineage, or you're kind of at the cusp. You heard about it, you heard about some of the benefits, like you said, fitness or community, focus, confidence, right? And so if you're on the edge, maybe this conversation can kind of encourage you to start something. And of course, we each have our own biases. I have mine, and seeing Aaron as well. But I would say any martial training, is can be useful. Of course, teacher and school is, and style are kind of considerations. So the 5 A's of martial activity. The first one is martial athletics. So by that, I mean combat sport. And I bring this up first because it's probably kind of first to mind in most people's conception of martial arts. So the competition, even the competitive spirit, the idea of testing yourself, right? You talked about perhaps the warriorhood, right? Regardless of whatever your gender is, like to test yourself, you want to see how you stack up. And so, of course, the modern mega bucks, I don't know how much, industry around this is, we know MMA, right? But also, there's also like more amateur kind of organizations around this, like the like boxing or all the martial forms in the Olympics. These are all martial athletics. The second A is I call martial acrobatics. So these are people who maybe they're into dance. Actually, I've seen some amazing dancers who also that ability, that aesthetic, that artistic nature transfers well to martial acrobatics. Doing flips. So making it look good, even entertaining, right? Even with music and things like that. And so you see this in the movies, right? Obviously, it should look good, right? And of course, the movie has evolved, right, from the 80s, 90s to now. Not just the CGI, but also I think in the past it's actually more just the acrobatics. So these aren't either or categories, but I think the martial aesthetic now is maybe more realistic, or maybe not. I don't know. But the third A is martial. I call it aerobics. So this is kind of the fitness type, like you mentioned, for your agility, for your health, especially physical health, your cardiovascular, respiratory health, and your neurological coordination, even a bit of de-stressing, right? And so so these are kind of like where you go to the gym, and then often they call it like kickboxing class, right? And not that kickboxing can't be within another category of the martial A's, but I would say in general, right, in that kind of context where you're going to gym, it's more for the aerobics. And then the fourth A is I call it martial actuality. So this is like real self-defense, practical techniques, no fluff, no rules. Of course, you train in a safe way, ideally, right? But the idea is that, in this context, you don't train with the idea of necessarily going into competition. Actually, you want to avoid martial situations, paradoxically. And so you train with the idea that this should work. This will, I hope, right, work in a real situation where there's an emergency, where you need to protect life and limb or others, right? And so there's a surprise element, right? You don't wear uniforms. A weapon could be pulled out, multiple attackers, 50% heavier than you, could be the opponent, right? And so, there's different styles like that. So there's like, a lot of people know like Krav Maga and maybe even TFT. So those are examples of the fourth. And then the fifth A, I call it martial alchemy. So this is like spiritual transformation, more meditation, spirituality, maybe even the philosophy, even the tradition. So connecting to something greater than yourself. Maybe community can fit in here, or maybe that's kind of within all of them. And so some examples are like, more the internal martial arts, whether it's like Aikido or Tai Chi Chuan, from the Eastern traditions. or even like Shaolin, right? You know the monks, right? It's actually that's a really good example of martial alchemy. You don't just learn to to break bricks or to beat up people. It's also overcoming yourself, right? So uh, so I mentioned that because I think it's a good frame for this initial conversation. Maybe we can refer back to it or not. So